Gosh, listening to all the speeches by Minister Grace and Melissa this morning, I actually would hate to be a country that competes for arrivals with Singapore because it always acts so swiftly. Melissa, it seems to me that, listening to all the initiatives that's been rolled out, it seems to me that we are all set for success in the future. So what could go wrong? What are other strengths that we need or we have already? Can you just let me know so that...
Raini, as you've heard, I think, the Singapore tourism sector and industry and as a country, we have great fundamentals. One of the cornerstones is that of trust. And a lot of what we do and deliver is very much based on this capital, which is trust. And I think that will remain a major competitive advantage for Singapore as we move forward. However, we also cannot deny that there will be headwinds. Global economy continues to be quite fragile and volatility appears to be more frequent. So in terms of how our industry assess future opportunities, at the same time mitigate through the different risk measures that you would take will be very critical.
Ben, why should we be optimistic?
Well, there's a lot of reasons. I think Melissa's keynote summarised a lot of those things that breed optimism in the country. But I think if I could just maybe come at it from a lens that Google would look at through our search platforms, and excluding China, we don't have great search data in China for obvious reasons. But if I look at the demand for inbound travel into Singapore, 75% of that comes from APAC for obvious reasons. I think geographical proximity and the rest of it. And Melissa mentioned, APAC's going to be the growth engine for the global economy for some time to come. And we're seeing countries that are emerging towards that sort of $4,000 or $5,000 GDP per capita type threshold, where we start to see that tipping over into, we have dispensable income. And we can look at things like international travel. So with that 75% exposure in terms of inbound, I think that there is a lot of potential for pretty dramatic growth. Outside of that, I think Singapore's world-class infrastructure, it plays into the emerging requirements of the traveller to see more predictability, understand what they're going to experience when they actually land. We're seeing that more so come across our platforms as well. So I think two things to be optimistic about in Singapore. But many more, as I said.
Agreed.
Okay, let's go to James. What you're hearing, would that be enough to attract investors to hotel and tourism asset class in Singapore, or are they, investors looking at more new asset classes like maybe data centers?
Well, I think capital and money is attractive to Singapore primarily because of the strength of Singapore, the rule of law, it's safe. And ultimately, capital also means people want to be here. They like it to kind of raise their families here, education, medical. So I think that there are a lot of things going on in Singapore. And of course, whenever there is any profit projects that could generate profits or profitable, that's where the capital will be deployed. It can be in the tourism sector, but also I think it can be in other sectors where there are opportunities for Singapore to kind of build on. So yeah, there are many avenues in which more capital is going to come into the country, but of course a lot of places that they can be invested into.
Yeah, just a little bit on that also. We've seen the rise of family offices in Singapore. Will that continue? And can you give me a sense of how these family offices directly or indirectly enhances Singapore as an attractive destination?
Yeah, I mean, compared to say 4 or 5 years ago, there were less than 400 family offices. Right now, I think more than 1,400 family offices. So it's a big growth. The strength of it really is built on because of Singapore as a financial center. And why Singapore thrives as a financial center, it's also really because of the rule of law, because there is a strong pool of human talent. So these are all the factors that drive Singapore and created that growth in family offices. And clearly, of course, with the money here, more people are spending time here as well. So it would benefit the country in the sense of domestic spending, in terms of even bringing families here, education, and also ultimately medical tourism, which is also a very important consideration for why many of these family offices set up. And I think the geography is expanded over the years. In the past, it used to be wealth from the region, Southeast Asia, but I think slowly we're seeing more and more capital coming from China, North Asia, and also from the US and Europe.
Raini, I thought maybe if I could add to that. I think the move of more family offices and wealth in general to Asia and to Singapore is actually a great foundation on which we can build a couple of things, right? So one of which is if you look at, let's say, what family offices choose to invest in. For example, art collection and art collecting as potentially an alternative form of investment. I think what that helps is, for example, in building our overall visual arts industry and sector, enabling us to reach out to more art collectors. So therein, I think it creates a very nice, healthy demand for some of the products and experiences that we're introducing in Singapore. That's one. The other is in the area of philanthropy. So be it in terms of, say, the efforts that family offices and wealthy individuals would take in respect of sponsoring and potentially making possible some of these experiences, be it through the likes of, say, exhibits at our Mandai, or in some of the exhibitions and maybe even sporting events that take place in Singapore. I think that's tremendously helpful.
Right. Well, speaking of investment, Ben, you know, we all want to know what the tech giants are doing. Are they investing in new areas? I think in the travel vertical due to generative AI. And I think you have been, Google has been experimenting with such generative experience since May. How does that work, and how is that going to impact the industry? The way they book, travel, and plan.
Sure. Yeah, so I think it's important maybe to step back and have a think about how we're approaching the rollout of Gen AI, or indeed AI in general across the company. First of all, predictive AI, it's been part and parcel of products that all of you would experience and that have really driven the planning and buying processes within travel for some time. Generative AI from about last year has obviously sort of taken over the conversation and really sort of brought to light, use cases that people weren't necessarily familiar with before, and it feels like magic, you're turning a sort of text into audio, into video, and these experiences have really shifted the way that people are thinking about their research and their planning processes, and we're seeing that then feed into how all the possibilities of planning within travel. People now are being able to sort of send one prompt to get a cohesive view of an experience or a travel opportunity that might have taken them many, many queries in the past. So that is an exciting shift. But then if I think about how we're thinking about the rollout of AI, Gemini, which has been launched only in the recent months, it's not just about search generative experiences. Gemini is an LLM, it's multimodal in nature, that will really horizontally start to light up all of the various different offerings that we have in market at the moment, and then potentially move into new areas of evolution and new products. So search generative experiences is a way of Gemini helping to enhance the search experience, but that will then permeate across multiple different products over time. As I said, whether it be a YouTube platform, or whether it be maps, or whether it indeed be B2B offerings, which many businesses are now plugging into, things like Vertex AI and Workspace. So it is very early stages at this point in time. Planning, researching, it is shifting in real time, but the use cases will evolve and become much more enhanced and amplified over time.
How do SMEs compete with giants like Google and Microsoft, which have vast amounts of data and resources?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think the reality is that we don't necessarily see this as in the wave of AI and the technological advancement. We don't see it as just a big tech story. In fact, a Kearney research that's just been recently released suggests that by 2030, we could see something in the vicinity of $1 trillion added to the GDPs of the Southeast Asian countries. So I think all companies of all sizes, small businesses, medium-sized businesses, large companies, will benefit from that. But we don't see it as a competitive piece as it relates to SMEs at all. We actually see it as an opportunity to be assistive, to provide tools and platforms for small businesses to benefit from the digital economy. We think about that in multiple ways. One is, you know, what products can we offer to small businesses, whether it be free or indeed paid. Products like Gemini is a great example, but Workspace is another. Google Analytics, which provides the foundational technology to sort of build businesses that can capture digital economic opportunity. We think about it in terms of skills training, and you know, Google Career Certificates is a perfect example of what we're doing there. And then we also try to provide infrastructure that companies can build on. So Vertex AI, which I mentioned before, it's a good example of providing access to the LLM technology that Google has to then provide use cases that are right for businesses within whatever sector they're in. Actually, Trailblazers, AI Trailblazers is a program we have with the Singapore government, which really unlocks resourcing on this front to help, you know, hundreds of companies across the country, free of charge, build these sorts of use cases.
I was just going to add that apart from the Trailblazer program that Ben mentioned, which is a great initiative, and we'd like to thank Google for that partnership across all of government. For SCV, we've done a couple of things, right? So firstly, I think in terms of democratizing access to data. So for those of you who haven't already signed up with our STAN, Singapore Tourism Analytics Network, please do so. It is a rich source of information and data that is curated in a manner to help our tourism, small business, mid-sized business, conglomerates, think about how to use data that will inform your choices and decisions around the next product, the success, or when's the right season in which you want to think about launching campaigns. So STAN is one such platform, and it's a free access platform. The other is Tourism Information Hub, which is a content hub on which we have, again, it's open to all our trade partners to bring on board your different content, be it text, visual, and that also is open to our global partners, which therefore means that it's a great platform from which our global partners are then able to extract information. Again, it is a platform that the Tourism Board provides for all of our partners. So it has absolutely no division across whether you are a startup in tourism, whether you're an SME, or whether you are a multinational corporation. And in addition to that, under our TCube program, as I mentioned earlier, we have an equity-free program called the Singapore Tech Accelerator, right? So the STA itself is a program that we bring together tech startups which we think are interesting, have proprietary types of research and development initiatives, and which they would like to think about working with tourism enterprises to build solutions. So that's gone into by now 7 cohorts. And we have some very interesting solutions, the 2 of which I had shared earlier. So I think there are different ways in which we're hoping to enable and give a leg up to all of our small, medium enterprises to really have a chance to compete and address that global opportunity. Yeah.
Okay. I think we should talk about rising middle class in Asia, because we're talking about the future, and of course we need to talk about India. I have a few statistics here. By 2047, when India marks 100 years of nationhood, its population will be 1.7 billion. Of these, 1 billion people will be middle class. That's huge. So Indians have shown us that they love traveling. They are a good source of incentive travel and meetings because of their burgeoning economy. They love big weddings. There's actually a saying in India, the wedding is more important than the marriage afterwards. But majority of the travel is domestic. If you look at it in 2019, less than 30 million Indians travel overseas. China is 5 times more, 150 million people. So James, because you cover India, will India outbound growth accelerate, and can it be on par or even bigger than China one day?
Yeah, if you think about India, population size the same as China, 1.4 billion right now. And if you compare the demographics, because demographics is really what drives economics in the years ahead. China, remember, they have one-child policy. That child is no longer a child. That child is probably about 40 years old. And if that child is married, they have 2 sets of parents to look after. So you can imagine, and maybe they have 1 kid or no kids. So if you think about that whole demographic pyramid in China, it's very much inverted. On the other hand, in India, on average, they are much younger, 28 years old. They are not a single child, they have about 4 or 5 siblings. So you can imagine that population demographics is very much in the other way around, a very healthy demographic pyramid that's going to grow in the years ahead. And easily India can grow 6–7%. And I think that's going to create one of the largest middle class in the world. And clearly, I think the travel trends, they will want to travel more. So far, they have largely been traveling within India and also nearby destinations. And of course, for them, one of their top destinations would be Dubai. So how do we kind of capture that? And I think that's going to be a very important, big market for Singapore to think about. It will accelerate or even multiply itself currently easily 7–8 times in the next 10–15 years. So I think that's a big market to capture. Should we ignore the Chinese tourists? Probably not. That's still going to be a big market, but we have to keep an eye probably on the growth of India, and clearly that's very important. And I mean, from my perspective, I think one has to watch out for one big trend, AI, but this AI is not artificial intelligence, it's ASEAN and India, because this is going to be. And if this AI becomes viral here, you know where you heard it from. Oh, yeah. It's from this conference. So AI is going to be very important, ASEAN, India, combined population, more than 2 billion people. So really, this is where the growth will be, and we have to build strategies on how we attract AI in the years ahead.
Yeah. Go ahead, Ben.
Yeah, just to quickly jump in, I think that really talks to the opportunity that I was sort of framing up front. India at the moment, GDP per capita somewhere in the vicinity of what, $2,500 USD, a lot of headroom as sort of financial well-being starts to take hold in the country. I was just debating a data point actually with Hermione Joy, who runs our APAC travel efforts at Google, about average itinerary values for Indians on international travel. It's something like $550 as it stands today. So with that headroom for growth, but then also, what is taking shape already, that there's incredible spends being deployed from the Indian origin already. I think, yeah, an incredible opportunity in the near and also mid to long term.
Yeah. Well, Raini, if you allow me to add on to what James and Ben have mentioned, I think India is a market that is immensely exciting for us. As many of our stakeholders and partners will recall, in the 2000s, and the mid-2010s, there was a point in time where I think everyone was saying that China and India, the two largest emerging, and then of course China moved ahead very quickly. But I think this may well be the decade that we really should pay attention to how India is truly emerging. If you think about it, apart from the demographics and the statistics that James and Ben have mentioned, the first point to note is that India is not a homogeneous market. It is a vast market. And one of the starkest reminders was from one of our trade partners in India on one of my recent trips. And we had inked a partnership with one of the influencers, a Bollywood influencer. And our trade partner was very clear in telling us that do not just think about India as Bollywood. India is also Tollywood. It is Collywood. It is Mollywood. It represents the very vast diaspora of India, which is both in the country and around the world. So I think we have to think about layering different strategies for different hubs. For STB itself, how we are approaching it is, apart from building the Singapore brand, we're working below the surface, as it were, with different partners in all the different regions. Yes, we pay attention to key metropolis, your Mumbai's, your Chennai's, your Maharashtra region, for sure. But at the same time, we're also paying attention to the likes of emerging cities. Perhaps for India, it's not so emerging. For us, potentially it is. Ahmedabad in Gujarat, Pune, Hyderabad, and of course, Bengaluru or Bangalore. So I think we have to take a much more refined approach to how we think about leveraging opportunities of the growing Indian economy. And that's a conversation that we'll love to have with all our trade partners. If you look at what's happening on the aviation front for India, tremendous developments. Air India was telling me that they're taking delivery of a new aircraft every 6 days. Question, where are they deploying that craft? We hope that it's going to be to Singapore. But clearly, the competition is out for our lunch. Thank you, James, for bringing up the competitive dynamics. There are some amazing cities who are similarly keeping their eye on the Indian market. And I think we need to think very hard as to what is going to be compelling for them. Some of our partners already do great work in terms of differentiating products for our Indian visitors. I think we'll have to think more. We'll have to create a multitude of different types of experiences which really speak to our visitors. And the great thing is with AI, that's hyper-personalization is a reality. So, you know, and for India market, tech and digital, that's a must-do. Yeah.
You mentioned hyper-personalization?
Yeah.
These days, I can't even get through to a bank.
I think we have some banking partners in the room today.
Sorry, except HSBC. Yeah, that's right. Okay, let's continue talking about AI. And sorry, Ben, I mean ASEAN, India. I mean, yeah. But this time it's ASEAN, you know, the middle class in Indonesia and Vietnam. That's also something to watch, I think. So I think Indonesia is Singapore's top market right now with 2.3 million visitors. And Vietnam is number 10 at about 500,000, right, Melissa? So do you see Indonesia remaining as the top market going forward? And what are your thoughts on Vietnam?
Yeah, so I think Indonesia was our top market last year, but pre-COVID, it was actually China.
China, yeah.
I firmly believe that Southeast Asia, which already makes up 1/3 of our visitor base today, is going to power through. But of course, India and China will also pick up pace and grow quickly if we do our job right. So in terms of the outlook, yes, I think the Indonesian economy is trending well. And now that the elections are, if you will, past us, moving ahead with all the new investments as well as developments that you may have read about in Indonesia itself, I think the economy is actually going through a bit of an upturn, and we hope that that's going to continue. Vietnam, I think, has seen some challenges, and maybe James can speak to that market. However, you know, if you take a long view of Southeast Asia as a whole, not just individual markets, that's going to be, it will still be a great generator of visitors for us in the future, and good spending visitors at that.
You know, recently I was in Surabaya, and I've met some kind of clients and friends there. And the thing about them is that they know Singapore very, very well, because they're here almost every other week. They know which planes, how many planes there are that flies out from Surabaya. They quote it like almost like a bus number, you know, not like a train, you know. So they travel it like a bus, so they call it like a bus. And they know our city very well. They know where the good food. They give me recommendation on where to eat in Singapore. So the ties are very close because historically, geographically, and also I think the schools as well. The children attend our schools. And also their parents go to our hospitals, so that linkage is very, very strong. How do we kind of build on it? I think there are many ways. You know, the young people want to, most of the time they're in Singapore too. And I think they are very interested in certain cultures. For instance, when they're here, strangely, they like to eat Japanese food, they like to eat Korean food. So we have that many elements that suits them. So I think it's going to be, Indonesia is it will still be a very big and strong market for us. I think we should keep it, and of course we should, in fact, grow it in the years, given that the economy is extremely strong. It easily grows 5–6% every year. And I think it's a very, very valuable market for us to always keep our eyes on.
Yeah, I would just add to that to say that precisely because they know Singapore so well, we have to think about what's really a brand, an experience, which is local and, if you will, intrinsically Singaporean to us, which still delights and is able to win new customers among Indonesians. So much as the global brands are going to be in Singapore and they're well familiar with it, my observation is the global brands are also in the likes of Surabaya, Jakarta. And if you take a trip now to Jakarta and many of the other cities in Indonesia, you will not be able to distinguish one shopping mall from the ones that's right on our shopping street, potentially. So I think we have to think very hard about what will be the Singapore brands, experiences and products that we really can promote and amplify, and which is why I think we're excited about projects like New Baru, which the Lo and Behold Group is doing, because it brings together emerging Singapore brands as well as brands that have grown up with us here and are trying to reach out to a global market. So I think projects like this give us a lot of optimism around how we should think about growing new categories and new verticals of experiences.
Okay, let's look at the people who will serve these markets. Jobs. Of course, everyone wants to know what new jobs could arise in the industry as a result of artificial intelligence and robotics.
Yeah, so it's always dangerous to get into a... That's directed to me, right?
Yes, it is.
Okay. It's always dangerous to get into a predictive view of exactly what jobs will look like. I think actually probably an important thing to remember is that while some jobs will definitely become redundant, some jobs will evolve and some jobs will be created out of will be created completely new. That's actually not incredibly new or unique. If I think about when I joined Google 12 years ago, we were a web-first company. Where we are now, we're very much a mobile-first company. The need for an app developer, as an example, didn't exist back then. So a completely new job, which is a very, very common role in the current digital economy, was created from scratch. So look, it's not entirely new, and it's not entirely different. So as I said, look, displacement, there will be some. Probably more repetitive tasks will be made redundant over time, but then these new jobs will arise. And then in the middle part here, very many roles will continue to evolve. The way that we think about AI is less about machines versus humans and more about how can AI augment what we would consider to be uniquely human qualities. Things like the ability to critically think, to negotiate, to influence, to exercise empathy. So I think more so than get into a situation of predicting exactly what new roles would exist, the way that we would think about it would be, first of all, people should be working on developing those uniquely human elements, but then also think about continual upskilling and up-leveling and updating. And companies as well should be thinking, in our minds, about creating the space for their employee base to continually update themselves and evolve. And that's why we put a lot of time and effort into trying to take the things that we're seeing, the understanding that we have across various different areas of evolution within the digital economy, and then try to make that externally available through things like the Google Career Certificates that I mentioned before. So coming back to it, rather than get into a predictive, these are the roles to look out for, I think it's more about developing the attributes that are uniquely human and working on those in a very concerted fashion, and then continually learning, having that lifelong approach to learning and updating, and companies need to think about creating those spaces as well.
Yeah, I would just add that firstly, I agree with Ben. I think it's absolutely right to say that it's going to be a big enabler. Right? So tech, I think we've always seen it to be a big enabler and facilitator, and even more so going into the future. It'll be a bit of a crystal ball gazing to say how that's going to change jobs and what kind of jobs. But suffice to say that I think tech is going to help to improve a lot of the productivity that we see in our workforce. So we've already seen some of the early gains arising from the deployment of some of these measures and initiatives. The other really is to say that in terms of how we should think about our education and training for tourism workforce is therefore enabling our workers to be able to use this in a manner that isn't going to create anxiety. And that would be enormously important. So ensuring that it finds its way into curriculum beyond just, so for example, tourism curriculum shouldn't be just about learning the usual classical models of tourism management, revenue management, because a lot of that is going to change. And we need to be mindful about how tech and AI and everything else is actually going to fundamentally rewrite many of the training programs that we have today in our schools. And for workers itself, you know, I think the key thing is really for our tourism enterprises to take that first step of commitment of making a bid to want to find out and be curious about that subject. And which is why a lot of the programs that we offer at the STV is about making sure that there is open access for our companies to be able to, you know, act on that curiosity. And at the same time, among the larger government, partnering with the likes of Google to then introduce programs which will enable and make it a lot more frictionless for companies to come on board and learn, test, build with us.
Thanks, because I was just going to ask how should hotel and tourism schools revise their playbook. So you've answered that. But I'm curious, how does the tourism industry compete for talent when studies after studies show that the top jobs globally in future will be in data, in AI engineering and computing? How do we compete?
Well, I'll take a stab at it, and
sure.
Ben,
Yeah,
please chime in.
I'll go off the bat.
I'll say that, you know, thinking about a career, well, firstly, there is a fundamental shift, I believe, in how people think about their careers and profession and work overall, especially post-COVID, right? So people want to look for occupations and jobs that are fulfilling, have a purpose, so a purpose-driven role and occupation. And I feel that many jobs in tourism actually provides for that. It fulfills that request and that desire to want to make something which is bigger than your shareholders, bigger than just that paycheck. So being able to recognize and contribute in a manner which is beyond your immediate position, the company, is something which I think many people realize is incredibly rewarding. And potentially for a lot of our Gen Zs, millennials, you know, that's going to feature more and more. So much as it will always be about having a competitive compensation and a set of benefits for our workers, it also means that we need to think about redesigning some of our roles and jobs that provides meaning and purpose and gives us that ability to actualize some of our talent and fulfill the desire to want to make a positive impact.
That's really well put. I would 100% agree with the purpose-driven motivations of certainly, you know, the next generations of the workforce. But if I could maybe pivot to